The local history room started in 1973 when this library, when we moved from Pomona over to this library here. There was a donation made by, we still have a plaque here to recognize the donation. Albert Lahner was a city attorney here for a little while, who did move out of town, moved up to La Habra and worked up there. But he was very civic-minded, I guess. Member of the Kiwanis Club, the Lions Club, all those sort of service organizations. And he passed away in '73, right before this library opened. So his wife, Lulu, made a donation to the library to start a historical collection. Now, the library over at Pomona had historically always been saving stuff. That's what we do in libraries. They kept it in a place under the stairs that they called the vault. And it was just stuff in boxes. There was no it wasn't available to the public. They were just like, someone might need this someday. Take this and put it over here. And then when we opened over here, we were in. They took the money from the donation to start the collection, and their focus was just to organize what they had, and then somehow take that and make it available to the public. And they were working out of a closet in what is still the back corner of the library over there. So that's the far southwest corner of the library, and it was a closet. And they spent several years organizing what we have, trying to figure out how to make it accessible and available. And then they realized the collection was growing and it was useful. And we moved from there up to what is now the Teen Center on the 4th floor here. Used to be audiovisual back in the day when we had an audiovisual department. And so local history has just continued to commandeer more and more library space. We moved from there in the 2010 remodel down to here, where we are in a state-of-the-art, climate-controlled facility. This here is essentially the public space of the local history room. The tables and furniture and all that sort of stuff were from the WPA library, built in '42. A lot of the books that are in here are just sort of protected collection. Some of them are books from the original Carnegie Library. Some of them are Fullerton or California history sets that are in here now as protected collection. We've got a collection of the WPA state books in here. But probably the most used books are the city directories, where they talk about, it's not just a phone book like we think of one today, where you have a name and a phone number. It will tell you name, address, where they work, like adult children living in the house, things like that. So it's sort of a city directory, who was living here at the time and what they did for a living. Here, the Haynes directories are used quite a bit by people doing environmental impact reports, which is not that exciting, but a lot of private investigators come in here and use them too, which is a little bit more fun. They are reverse directories. You can look someone up by an address or by a phone number, not by alphabet like a phone book would be. Private investigators come in here all the time. They know the phone number, but they don't know who that person was calling, and so they're able to do that sort of thing here. We have a complete run from '71 to current, which is also a little bit unique in that most libraries just lease current issues, but we have a historical record of them. So we're the only ones in Orange County that have that. So this is the really messy work part of the local history collection. So this is where all the stuff is. This is where we keep like blueprints. So we've got blueprints of historic buildings in town, like maybe it's right on top. Like Fullerton College, train station, Fox Theater. A lot of the original blueprints were actually salvaged from a dumpster in the 80s. I've got smaller versions over here of more current buildings, things like that. And I also keep, there's some good stuff in here, like a giant city seal. Third graders doing reports are always interested in the city seal and why things are what they are. I was looking for the things like this, the old night in Fullerton, all the old posters and flyers going back to the 70s. Posters that they did for the '84 Olympics when the torch came through town. We actually have the torch here that ran through town. It's down in the children's room. Handball was an exhibition sport in '84, and they did it out at Cal State Fullerton, and that was the little film sign. These drawers are full of microfilm. The Fullerton News Tribune, going back to 1893, I think are some of the earliest. We have two sets, an old set and then a newer set that hopefully will last a little bit longer. This is an old Carnegie table. So this has survived from the 1907 library. Every time I try to sit in it, it's shorter, so everyone hits their knees. As far as the nuts and bolts of like research and things like that in here, we have, so this side here is full of more maps and special collections. So a lot of times someone will come in and donate things. Downstairs in the children's room, we have a Japanese doll that was a gift of an elementary school in Japan. As part of, they used to do this doll exchange. And so this is like a special collection of everything that came with the doll. There was artwork that was provided by the students at the school of all sorts of various ages, and the history of the doll. And there was a chance she was going to make her way to Japan this year for a visit. I don't think that's going to happen, but some articles and photos from the exchange itself. So we've got things like that. Howard Cornwell was a mayor in town. So this is a box of all his mayor stuff, plaques and proclamations and ephemera from visits he went on, and scrapbooks of clippings and all sorts of things like that. So this is a whole box of his time as the mayor of Fullerton. And then a lot of this other stuff is just sort of, every time we do a National Register application in town, there's always a bunch of documentation that goes with it. So things like that. We have giant maps and blueprints over here from buildings. They come in handy every time someone needs to do a remodel or reconstruction of things like that. Some of this stuff over here on the wall is just art pieces that may have been hanging in various buildings at various times. This one in particular was donated to the children's room, at the Hunt Library back in '61. One of the service organizations in town. This is Crowboy. It's a children's book. And so there was an artist that did a version of Crowboy, took it down because it creeped the children out. This is an actual print of the art, public art that's over in the sculpture garden on the corner, southeast corner of Lemon and Chapman. And so they sold those so that they could raise money to actually do the sculpture, and it's still there. Well, up here I have a whole bunch of citrus labels, framed citrus labels that were donated to us. That's the Chapman one. They make it out for displays quite often. And then some large reprints of photographs and things like that that we display throughout the library at certain times. This is the jail register. It was 1921. So it's literally a list of the people who have passed through the Fullerton jail up into the 50s. But every once in a while we'll find an article about one of the stories that we like to tell all the time is these two bandits who robbed a San Francisco bank and then were captured here in Fullerton, and we were able to go by date and then find them here in the register as they how long they were here in Fullerton. So if I move over here, so I keep this is all library history, board history, foundation history, friends history, all sorts of stuff on the WPA library. You wouldn't even believe the documentation on this. Photos, papers for every piece of tile that was purchased. Not even just purchased, but every bid for everything lives here. Things like this, old minutes, the handwritten library board minutes going back to 1907 when the library started, up to more or less current. Our various sister cities that have donated things over time. We do displays with them quite often. These are interesting. I had an Eagle Scout last year as a project recreate some of the citrus labels, make the boxes, and then painted the Fullerton labels on top of them. I have 3 big ones, and 3 little ones. I think there's still a big one out front with oranges in it, and people come in all the time to see if they can have an orange, but they're not real. A lot of this down here is microfilm. We have the only other microfilm we have in here is the Wall Street Journal, because people still use that. They didn't want to get rid of it. So this is all microfilm for the Wall Street Journal. And a bunch of old copies of Ostrich Eggs for Breakfast, which everyone reading your column should remember from 3rd grade. This row gets used every day. This is pretty much the nuts and bolts of the whole collection. It's not very exciting, but it's the clippings. So every time someone comes in and wants to research, like in elementary school, so everything gets, back in the day they used to, I was hoping I could find one right off the top that was super old. They would just clip it out of the newspaper and put it in like a Princeton file by sort of broad subjects, by like schools. That's what they did in '73 because it was a smaller collection. Eventually they just started photocopying the articles onto paper. Now we just scan the articles. Less paper, less toner. But, so someone comes in and wants to research like an elementary school. So you got to go down and find schools, and then you got to find elementary schools, and then maybe they want to research Ford School or find out when Ford School closed, when the apartments went in. So we keep clippings on all that sort of stuff here. Sometimes on very specific subjects. Sometimes if you're talking like Coyote Hills, a much broader subject. So this is all just general information. And then from here back, these are all on historic buildings in town. Probably one of the most used things right about now is the Historical Building Survey. It was done in 1978, and the city went around and took a photograph and documented by hand every building. So they would have done something like this. Every building that was constructed before 1940, residential and commercial. They took a picture of it, and then they sort of documented briefly its condition. It was sort of a status report for historic buildings in town. We keep them here by street. We have grown the collection, so now if someone comes in and, you know, they live at 212 Malden or whatever it is, and they want to know what we have, so if we have any articles on who built it, or if there was a fire there, or, you know, a robbery, things like that. People love to find out those things about their houses. So we keep that on normal homes in town, and then these are all on historic buildings. So there's a lot of that and a lot of research in buildings these days. This slide over here is biographies. So there's very little chance that I have too much on most families in town, unless it turns out you're related to a Bass and Cheri or an Ambridge or something like that. We keep a couple things on Orange County as a larger group, you know, as a Fullerton things that relate to Orange County in some way. A lot of crossover with oil and citrus and things like that. So we do keep stuff on Orange County and then other Orange County cities, especially ones like Yorba Linda. We keep like Nixon stuff and stuff on other libraries and ports and things like that. But and then a little bit further back we have some of this. This is kind of like the fun stuff, ephemera. We'll have like old programs from high school sporting events and things like that. Old commencements from the high school going back to the teens and 20s and things like that. So this is the sort of fun stuff. And it just gets donated all the time. Comes in, people clean out garages. Got old Letterman's letters. So we keep a lot of the fun stuff in here too. The rest of this is sort of photos. This is a collection, a very, very important collection of 12,000 slides that have never been digitized. These are all photos. Every photo here has been scanned and lives on the computer out front. So a lot of people remodeling or opening a new store or restaurant in town want to come in, and they're, you know, all those photos are public information. They can come in and bring a little travel drive and copy it onto their travel and have it reprinted in a small size or a large size. This one over here has These are the annuals that we have collected. We don't have a complete run, but we've got a pretty good run from the going back to, this is the torch up here, the college, going back to early up into the 50s and 60s when they sort of stopped doing those. The high school annual starts here, like about 1907, or 1905 is the first year. So we've got some of the first annuals up to, I do get current ones now, but we have a huge gap from the 70s when they weren't collecting them to the current ones. So, and then a few from other schools. Mostly these come in as donations, and mostly they're Sunny Hills. I have very few Troy. A few of the junior high schools, things like that. Over here we have a complete run of the Observer in paper. We also have a digital version that we keep on the computer out front. We scan it here ourselves. So, and we've gone back and scanned everything. Another thing that everyone did in the 50s and 60s was scrapbook. Every organization like had a clipping service like we do over there of their, and then they scrapbooked everything. You can see they're falling apart. Some of them we have, if they were especially fragile, we did have them scanned so we don't lose the information, but the scrapbook itself won't hold up for that much longer. They're not on archival paper, so eventually they'll just sort of disappear. This one was from a YMCA, and so they every article from everything they've ever done here. This one was one that was scanned because it was not in particularly good shape. But we've got the YMCA, YWCA, Fullerton Beautiful, Wednesday Book Club, going back quite long. The Chamber of Commerce, which is sort of full of good ones. Women's Club. I just took on a bunch of stuff from the DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution. Have brought me some stuff that will add here to our scrapbooks. There was a program called the Bacon Report at the college when they did at their TV station, and it was just a very local, like, what's going on in Fullerton. And so we've got these weird tapes. They just, you know, have never been converted. Some VHS, some DVDs. Some things have been converted to DVD. We do keep old newspapers. Mostly we use them for exhibits and things like that. You know, the museum will want to come over and borrow something if they're doing an exhibit. And these go back to, we've got some of them that go back to, gosh, the 1912, 1913 on some of the earliest papers that we hung on to. I'm going to stop at the Hunt robot here for a second. It was donated to us along with some other pieces from a dollhouse that a gentleman who lived over by the Hunt factory would go get the test cans or the test for the label. So these weren't ever used and stuff. And he made robots out of them. A lot of these are government documents. So city council meetings on VHS, city council meetings on DVD. Now it's all on digital. But if you wanted to see someone throw a shoe at a council member, we have that on VHS. Most of this stuff is on environmental issues, especially with construction and things like that. So there's a lot of stuff on the McCall site, and then a few other sites that are not in good shape. A lot of stuff on Coyote Hills. And then city budgets and things like that. A lot of that stuff is available online, but if you really want to go back to the 1930s, you have to come look at it on paper. Like they just don't have all of that stuff out there. And a few more other things down here on more court stuff. So if there was a court settlement in town at the North Court up here, or we have all those old ledgers and things like that. We don't pull them out very often, but every once in a while we'll find a story in a newspaper article, and then we'll get to go research all that old stuff and see what we have to document that it actually happened here in town. I have a collection of Florence Arnold's, which most people in town know about. She was a hard edge painter. She was the one that started Night in Fullerton. She lived to be almost 100 years old. I think she was well into her 90s when she passed away. We have a couple of these hanging in the administrative offices. That's one of her early ones. Mostly she's known for things like this. This is the other piece that we have up in admin that she gave us for the bicentennial. Map of Fullerton from 1928. So it's the whole town site, all the way over to the Chapman Ranch on the east, over to the airport on the west. Bass and Cheri Ranch, you can see that goes all the way over from Target up into Whittier. Just huge. You need to see visually how large it is. And then little pockets of residential development. There it is. City of Fullerton, 1928. We have a huge map of the city of Fullerton. Best guess, late 80s. I have had many people come in here try to put a date to it based on something that they remember from their childhood. I'm thinking it might be from 87, which was the city's centennial. A logical time to do a project like that, but we can't be sure. So I let other people come in and take a stab at it. One of the best things about my job is not knowing what I'm going to be doing every day. Someone comes in here and I might think that I'm just going to get some clippings put away, but someone will come in here with a question. They're not always good stories, but it's someone who has nothing, or they've got like a spark of something. Like, I heard this, and then we can't always get them from point A to point L. We might, with every little bit in between. Sometimes we can get them a few markers and they fill in the story, but they had nothing before and they have something now.